recognizing, celebrating, and promoting diversity in Greater Madison. The new issue of Spectrum magazine is out, and we'll explore it with some of the folks who made it happen this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. Spectrum magazine is published by Madison Magazine, for which I serve as editorial director, but it is actually the product of a group of people and a group of businesses and organizations in the Madison area who recognize diversity as both an asset and a necessity if Madison is to be a place where people want to live and work. Issue 1 was published in January 2010. The fact that there is an issue 2 says something about Madison, but perhaps more important, about the folks who make up the Diversity Roundtable. Joining me are a couple of representatives of that group and someone profiled in that group, all executives in their professional lives. Malika Monger from Madison College, Annette Miller from MG&E, and Joe Gothard, who is with the Madison Metropolitan School District and is the person about whom there was a piece written. And thank you, Joe. Thank all of you for joining me this morning. Malika and Annette, welcome back, and we did it again.
We did.
Issue 2, which is kind of cool. Let's start by talking about the Diversity Roundtable for people who might not remember what it is. What is it? How does it continue to function? Other than Spectrum magazine, how might we see the Diversity Roundtable in our community?
Sure. Well, thank you again, Neil, for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. The Madison Area Diversity Roundtable is made up of a collective of Madison businesses. There's about 20 of them on the roundtable. It was started back in 2005 by Wayne Canty, who was working for Kraft, Oscar Mayer, at the time, and there were a lot of Kraft has been seen as one of the companies in our community who's been very progressive about diversity and inclusion and recruitment and retention. And I think as a way to do the work with other people and other companies in the community, Wayne pulled together his peers in the community through these businesses and said, let's work together as a roundtable to talk about diversity, to talk about how we can recruit and retain diverse talent, how can we promote what's happening in our community around diversity, as well as talking about how we can retain the talent that we do have in this community. So that's how it started. And from there, we just started to grow and sort of develop some priorities about what we could do to make a difference in Madison. So we really started thinking about 3 areas: how we can make an impact in the community, which is where Spectrum reflects that, how we can make a difference and promote our message about diversity and inclusion. The other piece is being a best practice incubator. You know, how can we, as people who work around the issues of diversity and inclusiveness, how can we leverage our own talent collectively within our companies, but with and through each other, and try to make a difference about how we actively promote inclusion in the Madison area. And then the other piece is really just promoting what's happening in the community itself. And so we have a website, madisondiversity.org, where we try to put events and activities online so people know what's going on. And so we've been just really excited about the progress that we've made these last couple years, but it was Spectrum that really made us big, if you will, because it's such a visible piece, and it reflects so much of our ideals and values as a roundtable. How
many members are there now of the roundtable?
Yeah, we're about 20. We've got 20 members.
Businesses and organizations.
Right.
The way, when I talk about it, Annette, the thing that has been so striking to me, a lot of organizations talk about diversity. A lot of businesses talk about diversity. Our company talks about diversity, but the fact that these companies and these organizations were willing to commit the time of some of their top people, the resources, I think has always been one of the most significant aspects of that. I mean, I understand this started in 2005, but I don't know how many people appreciate that that's a real commitment by these businesses to, if you want to use a trite cliche, put their money where their mouth is, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So we're really excited that our companies would be supportive of this. And I've been on the roundtable since 2006 representing Madison Gas and Electric. And I think at this point, one of the longer standing members of the roundtable. So it's really fun and interesting to work with other colleagues who are coming on board, who are new to the roundtable and really just have an appreciation of the work that's being done. And what's great about having that new perspective is just really thinking about how we can take the roundtable to the next level, which means, more innovative partnerships. It means more ideas about what we can do to really market and promote why diversity is important, why we believe it as companies participating on this roundtable, and really getting not only Dane County, but really outside of Wisconsin. Our real goal is to let people know that Madison and Dane County is a really diverse community.
Yep.
And if I can just add,
was Madison College from the beginning, right?
We were.
Were you there in the beginning?
I was not.
Okay.
I took over from Gwen Torkelson, who was the HR director.
Okay.
So,
all right. But I would like you to just talk about, from Madison College's perspective, how they see the importance of the Diversity Roundtable.
I think it's important to us because when we look at recruitment and retention, it's, what tool can we present when we have employees who we're trying to recruit at Madison College? What can we tell them about the community? What can we tell them about the college? And it's very important for us because it's not just about saying that we're about diversity and inclusion. We really reflect that in our mission, in our vision, and the things that we do at college, specifically towards our recruitment and our retention efforts. And that extends to the roundtable. One of the things that Annette said, of course, we do have 16 major organizations, but it's not just about coming around the table because you're a major employer in the Madison area. We are really looking for those employers who are, what are you doing around diversity? What is your mission? What best practices do you have to offer that other large area employers can take advantage of, can participate in? And that's something that we really wanted to share with other employers, the things that when it comes to our hiring practices that we're really committed to in diversifying our employees and our staff. So it's just a really important mission.
How do you do that, Malika? How does the roundtable do that?
How do we
get best practices out and get word out to other businesses that are not necessarily members of the roundtable?
Well, one of the things we do, for instance, so annually we have a diversity symposium.
Right.
And we came to the table and we said, what are some of the things that we collectively talk about when it comes to best practices that other employers might be interested in hearing and knowing about? So this year was actually our second year in doing the diversity symposium, and we had different sessions. Our attendance increased, and so it's really finding those topics that are of interest. So when we talk about recruitment, and this year what was really big is when you talk about those generational differences, how that really impacts employers and working with a lot of different generations at one time. And so we're really trying to, again, it's not just about us and trying to, have our silo of this is what's for us, but how can we make Madison, the area of Madison, a better place to live, to work, to play? And that's really how this came about with the Spectrum magazine, but in really trying to expand those efforts as well.
Great point. Before we'll go to a break, Joe, I want you to step back. 05, were you principal at the time at La Follette?
05, I was at Toki Middle School.
You were at Toki Middle School.
Yes.
So from that perspective, the Madison School District has been talking about recruitment and retention and the importance of diversity for much longer than the last 8 years. But were you aware of the Diversity Roundtable as a teacher?
I wasn't so much knowledgeable of the Diversity Roundtable, but Malika and Annette and others like them, exemplars in the community, I've always been open with and honest with and willing to call and problem solve and ask for help. We're really fortunate to have the two of them as two wonderful leaders and role models in our community, and we need to continue that kind of dialogue and that kind of networking to ensure that we're making and reaching our goals.
Well, learn is one of the areas we've always highlighted with Spectrum, and we're going to come back and talk about that and the other areas right after this. We are talking about Spectrum Magazine, issue 2, which came out in about a month ago and is in the January issue of Madison Magazine. There are copies available. We're going to tell you how you can get copies if you want them. And the whole idea was to disseminate this widely, to use these as a way of showing what Madison really is all about. But are you open to other companies to join the roundtable? Do you recruit them?
Right.
We're talking about what, MG&E, UW Health, Kraft, American Family, Oscar Mayer, Madison College. Those types of people are members here.
Right.
Anybody can join?
Well, we do have a process that we have in place where we recruit at the end of each year. And we usually get most of our recommendations from the roundtable members, or when we have, this year will be our 3rd annual diversity symposium, which happens in the fall. So usually after that, we get interest from companies in the community, and also this year a little bit more because we were launching the 2nd issue of the Spectrum magazine. We got some more prospects that were interested in the roundtable. Our process is we look at fit, we look at resources, we look at capacity. This year, because we have been getting a stronger growth and interest about the roundtable, we're trying to think of some other creative ways in which we can engage those who are interested, because the roundtable, it can only manage so many people or coming together on a regular basis. So we're really trying to think creatively about what are some other ways in which we can work with organizations and other companies who are interested in diversity and inclusiveness. Is it through more events? Is it through having kind of a hybrid membership format? So we're in the process of looking at that right now, but typically we onboard about 2 companies because
Gotcha.
Some will step down.
Yep.
Because things change
Yep.
for them, and so there is sort of that natural movement
Sure.
that happens within any organization.
Malika, you mentioned generation as a focus right now, and it was one of the things that you talked about when we had discussions about what to include in this magazine. I don't know how to describe it other than it is one of the most diverse magazines in terms of content. Talk about what you were thinking about what needed to be in here.
Well, here's the thing, and I really have to thank you and your team because you all were very receptive to the ideas. We came together and it was a brainstorming session, and it was we really need to highlight, going off of what we did in the first edition of the Spectrum, but we really wanted to highlight things that people don't normally hear about, people that you don't normally hear about, events, places, and things that you don't normally hear about, because there's just a richness of diversity, not only ethnic diversity, but like we talked about, the generational diversity, or just the things in our work area or in our home lives. And we really wanted to really find ways to focus on those things that and bring light to those things that we don't normally hear about. So who are the people that we don't normally hear about, and the events that we don't normally hear about? We also wanted to focus on those things that, again, are embedded in our community and highlight those great events and activities. And, there's also a resource and events directory at the end of the magazine. But that was really our goal, because like you said, it's such a diverse magazine, and we always get comments. I know we usually hand this out at our convocation each year to make sure that our employees have it. And one of the comments that I get is there's great stories, just going through it, the stories that you don't ever hear about. And I didn't know that was in the Madison area, and I didn't know that, about that person or that event. And that's what our aim is.
Perfect example, I think, is the give component. The idea that communities of color have a real rich philanthropy tradition that I think is often somewhat overlooked.
Yes. And really trying to highlight those different communities, because sometimes there's the stereotypes and the things that we hear bad about, for instance, say South Madison, but there's so much good going on in South Madison. You know, you have the restaurants, you have, you know, the Urban League, and, you know, you have Madison College, or an extension of our campus site that's on that side. And then you just have the community itself. You have the Boys and Girls Club that's totally expanded, that there's so many programs that people don't know about that's going on in those areas.
We could spend a whole show on this topic, Joe, when it comes to learn. It's always been an issue that the Diversity Roundtable felt very strongly about. And in this issue, the writer interviewed you about Learn. What was your perspective on this? What was the approach that you wanted to take in terms of Learn in the context of Spectrum Magazine?
Well, first, you know, there are 4 people part of this story, myself included, and I'm really number 4. The author was Jessica Strong, who was a former student of mine. I was an assistant principal at La Follette, and mentored her a great deal and grew quite close to her and her family. Number 2, I was able to highlight a very influential teacher on my life, and that's Lois Bell. And you know, to try to talk about her in just a couple minutes would be impossible, but I'll say this. As a mixed-race kid who grew up in a culture of no expectations in terms of learning, she changed my life forever. And to be able to share with her, to be able to share our story with the Madison community is one of the most honorable things I've ever been able to do. And it's something that I do frequently whenever I get a chance in talking about education. What she did for me is Mrs. Bell allowed me to understand who I was so I could understand the world around me. And she did that while having very high expectations for me. And it's something that I've internalized and kept close to my heart. And the third person featured in the story was a student who I was able to apply some of that same mentality to. The type of young man who came to Madison who shouldn't have succeeded. And he did. And he's doing great work, and I was part of it. But I was part of a community that embraced him at La Follette High School. And we didn't always agree. We didn't always believe in one another, you know, at the time. But I always told him that no matter what, I was going to be here the next day, and this is what I expect. And I saw him come closer and closer to me, and to see that he is now taking some of those lessons and in a junior college, preparing to transfer to a larger college. I just couldn't be any more proud of him. And the whole lineage of that story carries through to him. And that's the unique thing about Madison. We are small enough, we're big, but yet we're small enough where we can really harvest that kind of network and ensure it for everyone, adults, kids, adult to adult, student to student. And that's the great thing, and that we're able to share it in Spectrum is even better.
It's about the importance of education, but it's about your story and the 4 people and how that's still possible for every single kid in our community, right?
It is.
We're going to come back and talk more about Spectrum Magazine right after this. Spectrum Magazine is the result of the Madison Area Diversity Roundtable. Issue 2 is out. The website for the roundtable's on there, but to get copies of the magazine, the number 270-6322 will get you someone at Madison Magazine who can help you get copies of it. If you're a business, if you're an individual, if you're someone who just wants to see how much diversity there is in our community. But it really is a great vehicle for sending out to recruits, to organizations that you might hope to attract here. Just among the content in here I want to touch on briefly is media. And one of the things that I think we've done pretty well in this magazine is get input from the various media from communities of color. And it's pretty rich.
Yes. And this is one of the things I was particularly really pleased with on this edition, is that we were able to get input from all of our publishers of color.
Yep.
And that's so important, because a lot of times they are so focused on serving their individual niches, whether it's the LGBT community or whether it's the African American population or Latino population, but that they would take the time and say, for the greater good, we are going to, they all contributed an article, very deep articles as well, to some of the publishers who've
Great
been
stuff.
here.
So
right?
Umoja and Madison Times and the Hughes and Our Lives and La Movida.
Yes.
If you don't get a chance to see them regularly, in this magazine, you see them all in one magazine, and it's just remarkable how good they are.
And just their perspective on the community and things that are happening from their vantage point. To me, that's invaluable, the information that they add.
I want to touch also quickly on faith. It's an issue that doesn't get written about a lot in the mainstream media, and yet we know how woven it is to communities of color. And the highlights in this magazine, I think, are just special, are they not?
No, they really are, and I'm glad that we did a good job of representing all the different aspects of, really an individual's life. Not only the professional side of it, but the personal and the deeper, more meaningful side, which is that faith. And I think we've done a really great job of highlighting it, and I think also giving some perspective that there are a wide number of faiths in this community. And just because you don't walk by it every day doesn't mean that it's happening.
All right, I'm going to just end here with some quick thoughts about where we are, Joe, in terms of a welcoming community, in terms of diversity. Are we getting better?
I think it certainly is at the forefront of every discussion, but the real results come in the actions.
Yeah.
And we have to stay true to our word, and we have to be able to we have to be willing to hear tough conversations and turn that into dialogue that makes change.
Annette, what do you see in here in terms of?
I see that this is just the beginning of more work. And I know that on behalf of MG&E and being part of the roundtable, I'm still committed, and I know the members of the roundtable are committed to trying doing more and trying to be more innovative, more creative, and really continue to promote.
Annette said during the break, Malika, it's about inclusion as much as anything.
Right.
Does that fit with your perspective on that?
It does, and I totally agree. Because Madison can and is such an inclusive place that a lot of times people don't know about, that when you see that heading, the live, work, play, that this says it all, and how inclusive we are. That's what we promote. That's what's highlighted in there.
Spectrum, number 2. We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks to my guests. See you next Sunday on For the Record.